Hello, this is Overlord Bo, and today I'll be covering one of the toughest destroyers ever built and highly anticipated, the Tier 9 destroyer USS Johnston. The Johnston will be available in the armory as part of the Admiral's bundle, as well as a possible drop in the Wings of Freedom container, which I'll be talking about a little bit later. Now, the build will be shown on the top right, so you can pause the video to take a look. But let's talk about what makes the Johnston unique to the other Fletcher class ships. The main thing that makes this ship unique is the fact it has burst fire, and the burst fire which has more DPM than the standard fire mode, and it also has sap, which has a 36mm pin. So you get HE and sap rounds on this ship, which is very hilarious to use, and you can definitely abuse that burst fire to demolish lightly armored ships, destroyers, and even hit the superstructure of battleship. Just do a lot of farm with it. It is so much fun to use. So you get 5 127mm guns, same as the Fletcher but slower reload. It does have the slowest shells in her tier, pretty much same ballistics as other USDDs. You have to play the ship a little bit closer range. You can't do super long range farming, because if you try to farm at max range like 12 kilometers, you're going to be in a world of pain. It has like a 12-second air time at about 12 kilometers, so you're definitely encouraged to be a little bit closer with your engagements with this ship. So the caveat, you do get a really strong burst fire with this ship, but you can only really use them at closer range. If you try to use them at longer range, it's going to be really hard to use those guns effectively. Now, with this burst fire, you are able to bully a lot of the same Tier 9 destroyers. You can fight Mogadors, you can fight Grotigans or Frieslands, you can fight a lot of the other gunboat destroyers. Now, this doesn't mean you can just run up and gun them. You still have to be pretty smart with your engagements, but you can definitely have a lot of fun doing a lot of damage to a lot of ships with these guns. The biggest thing to note about this ship is that the burst fire, you're encouraged to use it. A lot of the time on other ships, the burst fire is more of a niche use. On this ship, you're pretty much going to be using that all the time. It has about a 7.5 to 7.6 second reload when you build into it, and the regular reload on this ship is about 3.6 to 3.7 seconds if you build into it. Now, with this reload, that means that if you use the burst fire, you get 3 salvos in the time you get 2 salvos with the regular fire. So I highly encourage, if you get this ship, to use burst fire all the time. The only time you would use the regular fire is if you're not so sure about a shot and you're trying to get warmed up before the burst fire. That's pretty much it. Other than that, you're going to be using burst fire a lot on this ship. You can get a lot of damage with the sap, and then you can set fires with the HE. Definitely super unique and a lot of fun to play with this ship. Moving on, let's talk about the hull of this ship. Now, you have a 17,100 HP pool and a 20,250 HP pool if you build in Survivability Expert, which I highly recommend. It is very mediocre health for a Tier 9D, but that comes as the pretty much punishment for getting the burst fire and the sap rounds on this ship. So you get the really good guns, but then you get the mediocre health. Kind of a caveat there, so it makes sense to me on that. Now, you do get the thin armor, typical for a US destroyer. Now, the ship is a small ship, so it does make it a lot harder to hit. So even though you don't have the most HP, you are a pretty small ship. So you're definitely going to have to rely on your small size to do a just dodge mechanic. But overall, the hull is very fragile, so make sure you don't get shot a lot or you're going to be suffering. For torpedoes, you get 2 5-set torpedoes, so you get a total of 10 torpedoes. You have a range of 13.5 kilometers, and they do 17,900 damage. Now, they have a reload of 170 seconds, so an extremely long reload. They are powerful torpedoes, but they take forever to reload. So overall, it's okay for a gunboat. Pretty much, you fire the torps, forget about them, and you switch back to guns. You can use them when you're trying to farm targets inside your smoke or when you're about to farm. So you can get them to DCP, and then you start blazing them on fire with the burst fire HE to get those perma fires, or you can smoke and farm and get them to catch a fire on them and get them to DCP, and then you catch them with the torp. Later in my replays, you'll see me when I did it to a Hanover where he DCPs and he eats torps and he pretty much bleeds out. He floods out. It's beautiful. You guys will see that later. It's because you guys will have 2 replays to watch, so you can kind of see 2 different matches to see better gameplay of the ship. I didn't want to have it just 1 replay. I thought it was better to have 2 put together. Since these matches were kind of short, I thought it was better to have 2 replays for you guys to enjoy. So let me know what you guys think. Would you guys prefer 1 replay or 2 replays? Let me guys know in the comments on what you guys would prefer, either 1 or 2. The anti-air for this ship is pretty much identical to the Fletcher, so if you played the Fletcher before, you know how this anti-air will work. It's definitely not good enough to defend against airstrikes, so you'll have to learn the just dodge mechanic, but at least this ship is maneuverable enough to where you'll be able to do a lot of dodging with this ship, and it's also small enough to where it'll be really hard to hit. So it's definitely best to just keep your anti-air off on this ship, and definitely do not bother with DFAA and just keep using your speed boost. Do not pick DFAA, just keep speed boost as your consumable. For depth charges, you get extremely powerful depth charges on this ship. You get 12 drops per attack. So you drop 12 depth charges per charge, and they do 5,100 damage per depth charge. This is extremely powerful and will one-shot subs if you position over them. It will absolutely destroy submarines if you can close the distance. So tier 8 submarines you're going to be able to run down and kill, and pretty much all of the tier 10 submarines you can, except, yeah, even the U-45 you can technically run down. It's going to be still rough to hunt, but everything else you're going to have a fun time hunting. Since we were just talking about how fast this ship is, let's talk about maneuverability. For the maneuverability, you have a base speed of 38 knots, which is already really fast for a destroyer. But if you do the speed flag and then you use your engine boost, you have a top speed of 43 knots, which is incredibly fast for a tier 9 DD. You also get an amazingly tight turn radius with a 560 meter turn, which is one of the best at tier 9, and a 3-second rudder ship time, which means you are super maneuverable at this tier. Overall, one of the best maneuverabilities at tier 9 for destroyers. It's going to make it where you're able to dodge and juke really easily, use that speed to be able to throttle juke, and use those turning to be able to dodge shells from battleships and cruisers. With its small size and really good turn radius, you're going to be able to do a lot of heavy juking against the bigger ships, and you're going to be able to dodge a lot of the bigger shells. We've covered pretty much every other stat at this point besides concealment, so let's talk about concealment. For the concealment, you have a 5.8 kilometer best surface concealment and a 2.6 kilometer air detached concealment. Both of these are amazingly good for tier 9. It will allow you to sneak up on enemy destroyers, even destroyers that have better concealments like the Ugamo or the Jaeger with like 5.4, 5.5. Even with 5.8, you can still run them down to be able to catch them, and you're able to do a lot of damage to them using your really good concealment to pretty much catch them off guard. And if you do run into more threatening destroyers like Club Bears, or even like a Bogador, maybe, they can still do a lot of damage. You can use your concealment to get out of the situation where you'll spot them first. You can kind of smoke up or back off. So you can use your concealment to be more aggressive, or you can use your concealment to be more passive, or even go on a flank, try to get some torps off. Even though they do take 3 minutes to reload, you can just, you know, get them off every 3 minutes. You'll be fine. Or get yourself in a nice little cubby area to farm some ships in your smoke, because you do get the amazingly good US smoke screen on this ship, which lasts a very long time. You also get a standard destroyer DCP, which lasts like 5 seconds or so. That's pretty short. You do get a choice between the standard engine boost that gives you a boost of 8% top speed, or the improved DFAA. And I've already said before, pick the engine boost. There's no reason for you to take DFAA. The anti-air is not worth sacrificing an engine boost that makes your speed go to 43 knots. Just take the engine boost. You will be happy that you did. So overall, I would say Johnston, pretty much an overview of this ship is it's a very unique burst firing DD, which is well suited for tearing apart lightly armored ships like cruisers, destroyers, and unlike other burst fire ships, the Johnston actually fires more shells when using the burst fire mode. So sticking with the burst fire mode as your main mode of damage is highly recommended. It is way better to use the burst fire mode on this thing than not. And this is probably the only time you're going to hear me say this, because on every other burst fire ship, it's not recommended to use the burst fire mode all the time. In this ship, it is encouraged. You are supposed to use burst fire mode in this ship, so definitely use it if you do get this ship. In the early game, you want to use your excellent concealment to ambush other destroyers and burst them down. You can either go to the 1 line or the 10 line early on, help to try to control caps. This thing does have amazing concealment, so you can use that to your advantage on getting caps and to do reconnaissance for your team. Then once you gain control of spotting, you can use your smoke to farm enemy ships or to support your allied ships. A lot of times if you're the only thing spotting, you can use your smoke to smoke up an allied cruiser or battleship to help save their life or allow them to farm. I've seen a lot more recent plays recently from US destroyers where they'll smoke up like a Des Moines or a Worcester or even like a radar Minotaur. They'll smoke them into a cap, or they'll smoke them along a flank. Just do a wide smoke screen to cover their teammates so they're able to farm while they spot. Since spotting damage does give you a lot more base XP than it used to, this kind of play actually rewards you. Not as much as actual damage, but it does reward you for being a team player. So a lot of times it's encouraged to do that more team player as long as you can depend on the player, right? Like, so normally those kind of plays you would save for a division, but if you feel like your teammates aren't up to the task, which seems to be common nowadays, then you may not want to do it, but just take it with a grain of salt. A lot of times people will use the smoke properly, but just be careful to see how they're playing, if you can actually trust someone with your smoke screen or not. Overall, would I say this is a good ship? Yes, I think this ship is an amazing ship. How I rank it in randoms, ranked, or clan battles. In randoms, I think this ship will do amazing. In randoms, I think it'll be a very strong contender. Great spotting ship, high damage with the guns, good smoke, good maneuverability, small size. It'll make it very hard to hit, and it's going to do amazingly well in the tier 9 meta currently in World of Warships. In ranked, I can see this also being a strong contender for tier 9 for the likes of a lot of times you see the black in tier 9, you see Mogadors, you see Grodigans, Frieslins, Benhams. This ship will definitely tear apart Benhams like no tomorrow. It can fight Grodigans and blacks, but the problem is that the black DD has that radar advantage over this thing, where you have to catch the black when he already uses radar and he has the smoke up. Because once the smoke goes down and he's kind of free roaming, you have that little bit of time to catch him. The Mogador you can also beat as well since you have Sap. Sap is pretty much the main weakness to the French DDs because the French saturation doesn't really work on Sap shells. So you're able to tear apart French destroyers with those Sap shells. So definitely keep that in mind when you're fighting French destroyers in pretty much any ship. That Sap rounds it pretty much mitigates that French saturation. You still do a lot of damage. For clan battles, for me, I don't know if this would be a great clan battle pick. like it could see potential of clan battles is tier 9, but the black has such a wide variety. I feel like the black could be more of a meta for tier 9, or the Jaeger. Bogador could also see use for tier 9 clan battles. I don't know if this ship would see a lot of potential because it doesn't have a lot of utility besides the smoke and its burst fire potential. I feel like the black or other Ds would have more potential for tier 9, so I don't think this ship would be used in competitive that high. But for ranked and randoms, this ship will be widely used. This thing will be a lot of fun to play for sure in those. For brawls, I would say it probably wouldn't be well for there either. A lot of times the brawling ships, you're looking more at heavy hydro, heavy torps, like Paulo Emilio, Chronigans, are heavily used in brawls for that hydro. Paulo Emilio is really just for yellowing or for memes. Bogador is to take out the DD quickly. It has its own torps, so I don't think the Johnston's going to be really used for brawls, but it's definitely going to be used in randoms and ranked. So if you're mostly a randoms and ranked player, then you're going to have a lot of fun playing the ship in those modes. Now, to talk about earlier, we said that the Johnston would be available in the armory as part of the Admiral's bundle, and as well as possible drop in the Wings Freedom container. Those are going to be going on starting on the, it should be about the 5th or the 4th of July. It should be around then, or maybe the 3rd. Normally when these new things come in, they come in on the Thursday or Friday of that week, but since it's July 4th coming up, also happy Independence Day to everyone that's watching the video. Happy Independence Day. Yeah. Oh yeah, something to note, she will be replacing the Georgia in the Wings of Freedom container, so her drop rate will be extremely low in that container. So I would say if you just want to get her, buy her from the Admiral bundle, or just buy her straight up if they allow it. I'm praying that they do. A lot of time they have her to buy the bundle and it's just a price. If they just allow you just to buy the ship, then I would say just buy it. But if you have the money for it, then go for it. I know this ship is highly anticipated. It's one of the most highly requested ships in World of Warships, so I know everyone's going to be fighting at the nail to get this ship. Now let's talk a little bit about some of the historical facts of the Johnston. The Johnston was one of the many Fletcher class destroyers that are commissioned by the U.S. Navy. She is famous for her vital role in the Battle of Samar, defending a light force of escort carriers from an overwhelming armada of Japanese ships. Though hopelessly outgunned, she charged the heart of the Japanese fleet in valuable time for the CVs to escape. She proved extremely difficult to sink, even tanking hits from the Yamato herself without dying. Ultimately, she did sink during the battle, but her sacrifice, along with other US DDs, allowed the CVs to escape and convinced the Japanese fleet to retreat as well. That's pretty badass that the ship did that. I did watch a recent documentary about that, and that's pretty badass that she did that in her captain as well. That's pretty badass. Yeah, for sure, for sure. But yeah, just to note about this particular ship, you have to really know when to use the HE and SAP on this ship. That's something that a lot of people don't really know or to do when they have two different ammo types, is to switch between them, like knowing when or not to. Pretty much how I do it is like this. If someone's battling or after you, use HE. If someone's angled or broadside, use SAP, right? If you are trying to get someone to DCP, use HE. And when they DCP, you can use a SAP for a little bit, then switch back to HE once the DCP's done, and then you're able to set a fire and switch back to SAP, because your main damage dealer on this thing is going to be SAP, right? The main damage here is SAP. Now, you don't want to forget about the torps, right? You get 10 torps on this thing. You get a lot of torps. The torps can do a lot of damage, and if they're used properly, you can pretty much dev strike even the highest tier of battleships. You can do so much damage. As you saw in this replay, I got the Hanover to DCP. He got double flooded and he flooded out, and I did over 100k damage to him. And that was because I got him to DCP by a fire. And that is one of the main rules in World of Warships. You do not DCP a single fire. Do not. The only time you would DCP a single fire is if you know you're not going to be shot at, if you're going behind an island you're not going to be shot at, or you're so far away that you're likely no one's going to hit you. You do that as well. You just know, like, if you're not in a threatening situation, then you can DCP. But if you are, then don't DCP a single fire, or you're just gonna get flooded out. I've made that mistake. Everyone's made that mistake at some point. Just lesson learned. Don't do it. That's the best way I can put it. But anyway, that is gonna be my review of the Johnston. If you guys have any questions or concerns, definitely let me know in the comments down below. Thank you all for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you all later, and enjoy the stats from this replay.